afternoon, everyone. My name is Rabia, and I am the Senko at the English College in Dubai, which is in Al Safa 1. To give you a little bit of context, I have recently come from the UK. I've been an educator in the field of SEN for 13 years so far. So I've always worked with special needs children. Now, I am by no means an expert, so anytime you want to stop me, anything you disagree with, please feel free, okay? If you would like to stay behind and ask me any questions, feel free to do so, okay? But I'm gonna try and make this, we don't have enough time, so I'm gonna try and keep this as brief as possible, but also very interactive, okay? So, A and B, who looks uncomfortable to you? You can just do a show of hands. Who do you think? A? If you can just show your hands for me. Okay. B? Yeah. And in between, you're not sure. Both look uncomfortable. Okay. Why do you say both of them look uncomfortable? They're laughing. So sometimes when people are nervous, they tend to laugh or ramble on. Okay, so if I asked you this, which one has autism then? Which one do you think has autism? Is it A? Put your hands up if you think it's A. No? Okay, B. Most of you think it's B. Do you know who this person B is? It is Temple Grandin, very good. So Temple Grandin is very interesting. Do you know much about her? Absolutely. So person A is what we would call a neurotypical person, which is what we are. We're not on the spectrum. Person B is a person on the autistic spectrum. So they are the ones who have social and communication difficulties. That person is Temple Grandin. She advises people on livestock. She's an animal scientist. She was diagnosed when she was 40 years old. So she always knew that there was something going on. She just didn't know what it was. So when she was 40, she was diagnosed with social and communication difficulties, which is also what we diagnose for when you're on the spectrum, okay? So, another one, odd one out, A, B, or C? A, does everybody know who A is? No? Daryl Hannah, she's an actress. Okay. If you think it's person A, put your hands up for me, please. No, okay. Person B, do we know who that is? Is J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter, the author of Harry Potter. C. Yes, Bill Gates. Do you think he's on the spectrum? Do you think he's on the spectrum? Why do you think he's on the spectrum?
I've heard that he had communication issues when he was a child, that he struggled socially to fit in, he was a bit of a loner. That's all I know. But out of those three people, he's the one that I think I've heard is socially awkward.
Okay, so if I told you about Daryl Hannah is a very famous actress. Now, it nearly cost her career because she didn't want to socialize with people, so she would often not go to premieres if her movie was launched. That nearly cost her career. So she is on the spectrum. So that's Daryl Hannah. B is J.K. Rowling. She is not on the spectrum. She has a very wild imagination. I mean, anyone who's seen Harry Potter, who has read the books, you know that she has a very vivid imagination. So she is a neurotypical, as we would describe. Person C, yes, he was very socially awkward, did have communication issues, and he also has a distinct rocking movement when he's working. And often, people who are on the spectrum or have social and communication difficulties tend to excel in things such as computers or numbers. And this is exactly what he was doing. So today, for my session, I'm going to just give you a whistle-stop tour on what social and communication difficulties are, especially focusing on autism. The reason I decided to focus on this was because Dubai is moving through, towards inclusion. And with the vision that all our schools cannot be selective anymore, we will have to be comprehensive. We will have to take students who've got special needs. This kind of special need is something that everybody is going to come in contact with. Now, I come from a background where I've worked with students who are on the spectrum, but I also have a lot of students, children in my family, like two of my nephews, who are on the autistic spectrum. So one is on a very milder side, and I'll talk you through that, and then one is on the extreme side, and I'll talk you through that. Okay? So I'm hoping by the end of this session, you will be able to leave with a little bit of information of how to cater for pupils with SEN. So, Asperger's syndrome is what they normally say is a milder end of the spectrum. So those pupils are high functioning, they tend to be able to get through. I do have handouts for you, so you don't need to take pictures of everything. I have handouts at the front. So those are pupils who need a little bit of support, but they should just be able to function in a society. My nephew, he is 22 years old. He is on the other side of the spectrum. So he is on the Asperger's end. He was, we thought he was fine, there was nothing wrong until he was diagnosed by the age of 4. He then went to different schools, schools couldn't cater for them, and there was always something there. So when my sister found out that he was on the Asperger's end, it was really, really hard because, you know, for him, he couldn't make friends, he couldn't maintain friendships, and that really made it very difficult for him just to function. When he got to the age of 18, after having so many school changes, when he finished his 6th form, he thought, that's it, I'm not going to university, I'm going to work. Where do you think he ended up working? In a retail. Why would you ever put a child with Asperger's in retail? A retail environment, shops, departmental stores, are the most unpredictable environments you can actually put an Asperger's child in. They need routines. They need repetitions. They need things that they can do over and over again. Schools, for us, I think I've probably on the spectrum somewhere because I like my routines. I like working in a school. I know at a certain time it will be lunchtime. I know when the lessons are going to begin. I know who to expect for my lessons. There is no unpredictability unless the fire alarm goes off. But for him to deal with people day in, day out and dealing with new situations was creating havoc in his life. And in the end, he left. He just said, I can't do this anymore. So he left, and now he's gone back into university and pursuing a career in history. So he's studying history because that's what he wants to do. He's passionate about dates. So they like to avoid change. Anything that upsets their routine, they do not like. A bit like me, if my husband decides to drive me to work, that's it, I cannot stand it. Because he drives at a certain pace, he takes a certain route, he leaves at a certain time, and that's not me. So everybody has a little bit of social communication difficulty in them, or Asperger's in them, but it's how we deal with it and how we regulate ourselves. On the other end is the autistic spectrum. Now, right at the end of the autistic spectrum are students who cannot communicate. So they use something called PECS. PECS is a picture in exchange communication. So they would literally, if they needed to go to the toilet, they would have their picture book and they would literally stick a picture of the toilet. They will not be able to communicate with you. But just before that, there are children, like my other nephew is also on the autistic spectrum. He goes to a special school. He needs routines. He needs everything like military style. So when he comes home, his mom has to make sure that everything is visually laid out for him. So he knows that he needs to work through every single thing before he can reach his reward. Otherwise, the unpredictability will unsettle him so much that he will scream, he will cry, he will shout, he will do whatever he can. If, in terms of it's 3 areas, so it's a triad of impairments. If you fall within 2 of those, 2 or more, then you are likely to be on the spectrum. So if you have difficulty in communication, if you have difficulty in social interaction or relating to people, then you can possibly have that as well. Or if you're rigid in your thought, if you have lack of imagination, if you're really literal and if you're black and white. And that's why most of the pupils on the SEN register, especially with those who've got ASD, tend to do really well with numbers because numbers are very black and white. You either have a right answer or you have a wrong answer. There's no middle ground. And this is why they struggle when it comes to English and especially literature or history when they have to travel back in time. And you just think, there's no way I can imagine what it was like for, you know, peasants to live the life that they did because you can't travel back in time. And that's where the challenge is. A lot of their behavioral problems stem from the fact that they cannot express their emotions, or they might have speech and language difficulties, which is why they cannot express their emotions. They need to be taught normal reactions. So, things like, I once worked with a boy who was in year 11, and, he was very rigid in everything. And for 5 years, I had the pleasure of key working him and being his Senko. And I think what really, towards the end of it, his behavior got so bad that mum couldn't cope with him, and we were looking at residential placement for him. But when I sat down with him, he actually said to me, it all went back to primary. So 5 years he had not let go of what had happened in primary. And it was all over a slice of cake, because mum had bought a big piece of cake. She took the bigger slice and he was given a smaller slice, and he just could not let go. And because he had such difficult social and communication skills, and he had speech and language difficulties, he could not communicate that to us. So he was exhibiting that through his behaviors. But when he got to year 11, obviously he's had lots of speech and language therapy, he had a lot of work, he had a behavior mentor. That's when we started to there was something underlying. And it all came down to mum. He now is in residential care. Mum has said that she cannot actually have him at home because he is that dangerous. So there is no need to treat them differently. Same boy. His behavior was appalling, as teachers would say. And I said to him, look, you need to come and see me after school, because you're now going to have a detention with me. So come and see me at 3 o'clock. My mistake, I was a little bit late. Never be late with an autistic person. I came about 3:05. He was huffing and puffing, and he said, why are you late? You're 5 minutes late. And I said, look, the nature of my job, I got called away, I had to go. No, you should have been here at 3 o'clock. So I said, look, I'm going to put you on report, but I'll give you another chance because it's my fault. I'm late. I'm 5 minutes late, so I will put you on report tomorrow. He was absolutely adamant that if I have said to him that he is going to be on report today, he needs to be on report. It doesn't matter if it's the end of the day. So they're very, very rigid. They like routines. They will adhere to school rules. No matter what rules you give them, they will follow them. Okay? And if anyone breaks any rules, for example, in a game or anything like that, or if you try and bend the rules, it's not going to work. So I'm going to set you a challenge, which is why I wanted you to kind of work, come towards the front. You need to be in partners for this, and I'm literally going to time you for 60 seconds. So with a partner, you need to decide who person A is and who person B is. Partner A, you are going to tell the person sat next to you about what you did at the weekend. And person B is going to talk about how their week, we're still early week, how their week has been so far. The challenge is you have to talk about your topic at the same time and not respond to the other person. There is no way you can stop and ask them any questions, or if there's something that they've said and you think, oh, I don't agree with this, you cannot respond to them. So you need to get into pairs, please, if you can. And I will start you in 10 seconds for 1 minute. Are you all in pairs? You need to get in a pair. Okay. Your time starts now. Go. It gets really noisy. You both have to talk together at the same time. Same time. Simultaneously. Ten seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Stop. Thank you. Okay, it was actually quite nice because, normally it turns a bit like a zoo, and I've got to ring all sorts of bells to get people's attention. How did you find that? How did you think it was? Was it easy? No. Why not? It doesn't work. What doesn't work? Why doesn't it work? Sorry? When you don't listen to other person. Exactly. When you're not listening to the other person. Often, students with social and communication difficulties, we would ask them, we would say, good morning, how are you? And they'd say, good morning, but then you don't really get anything back. If we teach them that, it's polite to ask the other person, how are you? Ask them, how are you? They will do it if it's learned behavior. but then that's it. They're not interested in what your response is. So if I said, how was your weekend? And you say, oh, it was good, how was yours? The minute I start to tell you about my weekend, that's it. They've switched off. They've ticked that box. They don't want to know how your weekend was. That's learned behavior. They have learned to say that. This is why I wanted you to have a little bit of a taste, because sometimes we are just eager to share our information and share about our weekend with somebody. But if they're not interested, it's not going to work. Now, if I asked you these questions, what would your response be? So if I said, can you open the window? If I say, might be my tone of voice, I might say, can you open the window? What am I asking you to do? Exactly. You would think, okay, she's asking me to open the window, I'll get up and open the window. You're not going to just sit there and say, yes, I can open the window, and that's it, wait for me to give you another set of instructions. If I say, can you speak French? Okay, so you'll probably say only one sentence, you'll probably say yes, maybe no, I can't speak French. But you're not going to stand up and start talking in French, are you? You're not going to start speaking in French. So it's all about context. We, as neurotypicals, are able to work out what the context is. So if somebody is saying to us, can you open the window? They're probably giving us an instruction, and that's what we need to comprehend. But if somebody is saying, can you speak French? We don't need to start speaking French or Spanish or whatever other languages it is. They're just asking us for interest. So some of the traits or difficulties they have is retrieving information. So working memory is quite poor, or they might not be able to hold information, so you need to do a lot of overlearning and pre-teaching. So if you are working with other teachers, you need to ask them what's coming up so that you can pre-teach that already to them. Because chances are, if they go in lessons, they're going to forget anyway. The students I work with, they do a girl I'm working with at the moment, she does a history test. She does really badly. The history teacher gets back to me, says, look, you need to help her revise. So we do flashcards, we do PowerPoints. She revises, she goes back, does the test again. Half of it she has forgotten again, but she scores better. So an opportunity for them to revise with a trusted adult that they feel comfortable with is key. It's really important. Predicting outcomes. We know that if we were to say something rude to somebody, they are going to get upset. These are our behaviors. This is how we regulate ourselves. We know that in an environment, we can't say things that are going to be unacceptable. Pupils on the spectrum or who have social communication difficulties don't necessarily have that filter, and that has to be taught. So different environments, different things. We can switch codes. So if I'm talking to my friend, I'll be able to switch code. If I'm talking to the head teacher, I'll switch code. And I know exactly how I need to speak to and address everybody. People with ASD might not necessarily do that, especially if you're the one that they trust a lot and they see you as their second parent. It's very hard for them to hold back and think, oh, I better not lash out on this person. Because often they would, in the schools that I've worked in, I've had students throw things at me. I've had students who've kicked me. I've had students who've sworn at me. But it's never personal. It is never personal. It is their behavior because of whatever their need might be. They like routine. They have poor organizational skills. You need to help them. You can create visual timetables. I have a handout that also has some visual ideas and strategies that you can use for your students. Facial expressions, they find it really hard to read. We can tell when somebody is angry. We can tell when somebody is happy, but it's not necessarily as easy for students on the spectrum. So we have to make it explicit through our body language. Even when they're angry or they are upset and they're screaming and shouting, and we ask them, what's happening to your body? They don't know. They have no idea. My nephew, if he hurt himself and he was bleeding, he would have such a high pain threshold, he wouldn't even know he was bleeding. Until he got to the age of 7 or 8, that's when he was taught that if you bleed, this is what happens. So you need to have it checked out. So these are all the things that we need to make sure that we work with our ASD kids. They can use vocabulary. They can use a wide range of vocabulary sometimes. Some of them are very articulate, but it might be that the context is wrong, okay? And some of them, like to be cheeky and then use their label to their advantage. So it could be, oh, I need this in my exams and I need that and I can't do this and I can't do that. Maybe my LSA should do this for me because I have ASD. Some of them are very clever in playing up on this. So once you get to know your pupils, you will know who's playing up on it and who isn't. Ooh. This is the one I need to play, and I need to ask them to play it. This is an insight into ASD.
Six, 7, 8, 9. Take my hand. No, Alex. It's fine, isn't it? I'm not naughty. I'm autistic. And I just get too much information.
I think this summarizes it really beautifully, that we as neurotypicals can switch things off. So if there's somebody working, I can switch that off. Somebody in the background, I can switch that off. There are lights, I can switch those off. I don't have to I don't actually think about every single thing. Whereas an autistic person would hear the computer going, would hear people talking, would have sensory difficulties. If you wear a strong perfume around a person who's on the spectrum, they are going to know that you're wearing a different kind of perfume, and they might not like it. If you're wearing a different color, a particular color that they don't like, chances are they're going to get really upset with you. So you've got to be really mindful of pupils on the spectrum, because they're taking a lot from the environment. We take a lot from the environment, and we can regulate ourselves. We know that if it's getting too much for us, we can go in a corner and get ourselves together. I had a bit of a sensory overload because I'm new to Dubai. The roads are quite confusing. So as I was driving to Dera, and suddenly I took a wrong turn, something happened, I could hear the police van in the background, and they had the sirens on. And I thought, that's it, they're coming to get me. I had to actually pull into a road, sit there for 10 minutes, gather myself together, and I thought, that's it, I'm going home. So I went home. I did not do what I had to do. This is exactly what a person on the spectrum feels like sometimes. It gets too much, and we just expect them to get through mainstream education, to get through, and read everybody's expression day in, day out, and work with lots of different teachers, and not give them a chance to get themselves together when they need to. A sensory room, if you have an opportunity to get one in your schools, or your parents of your children can get one, then it's really important. Having things like, sensory tubes, where they can just go in. It's a quiet, dark room where they can just sit down, listen to some music, gather their thoughts, come back together, and then function in mainstream. These guys are functioning parts of society. They just need our support to be able to function and make a living for themselves. So, ASD or just odd? Does everybody know who that is? Probably not. I'll leave that one. It's Basil Fawlty from Fawlty Towers, if you haven't seen it. Mr. Bean, I think everybody knows Mr. Bean. Is he ASD or is he just odd behaviors? A lot of the time teachers come to me or educators come to me and they say, you might want to have a look at this student because he's odd. I don't know what odd is. Odd just means they don't fit in with us. But I think if the world was run by ASD people, it would be very, very amazing. It would be perfect, everything would be amazing, and everything would be followed to a T. Now, Mr. Bean is probably socially very awkward. His teddy bear, a grown man with a teddy bear just says it all. We've spoken about Bill Gates. Albert Einstein, he was dyslexic, but he was also on the spectrum. When he got married, he was very open to his wife about his affairs. He wanted to have affairs, so he would sleep around, he would commit adultery, and he didn't care. He had children, 3 children, Now, in some texts, it says that he couldn't stand the sight of his children, but later on, when I've read further texts, actually says, no, he was a good father. He wanted to spend time with them. He did activities with them. Susan Boyle, I think that was Britain's Got Talent. She had a meltdown in an airport just before she was supposed to fly to Glasgow, to her hometown. She just had a meltdown, and she was on the phone to somebody, and she was screaming, help me, help me. And then people had to go to her aid. Her manager had to go to her aid. And Mozart, he had echolalia, so repetition of things. He hated loud noises, but then he went on to become a famous musician. So, you know, the world is their oyster. We just need to nurture them and guide them through. So, I'm going to give you a task. If you could just take one, please, and pass it along as quickly as possible. All you need to do is this. I'm going to give you scores at the end. There are 50 questions on this. I don't want you to overthink them, and I don't want you to make any appointments with any of your doctors to say, this is what it's come back as. I think I might be on the spectrum. Have a read, whichever one applies, tick it, and then at the end, just count slightly agree and agree, just those two columns. I'm going to give you 5 minutes for this. when you're done, can you just count the agree and slightly agree and just put your number in a little circle, just so I know how many you've got, because I'm going to give you the scores in a minute. Don't worry about the disagree ones. One more minute. Was it interesting? Gives you an insight into yourself, doesn't it? It's like, ooh, when I did it first time, I was just like, no.
Well, I'm a bit discouraged because the last quiz I took in one of these told me I wasn't very emotionally intelligent.
I know, I was well below average, it's fine. We're coming out with all sorts of needs, aren't we? It's like worrying. 15 seconds. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. You didn't finish? Oh, okay. That's okay. This will give you a little bit of an insight into you. I was just saying, the first time I did this questionnaire, I thought, that's it. It's all doom and gloom from now, and I should just go and get myself tested. But it's not. It just gives you an idea as to what a person on the spectrum feels like, or what kind of things they experiment. There are students who would eat a certain thing every single day because they don't like textures of anything else. They would wear a certain kind of clothes or fabric because they don't like any others. We can experiment with fabrics. They don't like it. So your scores are here. If you scored 34 or up, you possibly have a social communication difficulty. You're possibly on the spectrum. Anything between 30 to 33, possibly you show some traits, but we're not really concerned. And then if you're 0 to 29, there's no evidence. I wasn't 0 to 29, so don't just take it as with a pinch of salt. Don't think this is anything bigger than it is. Any surprises? Anyone in the 34 and up bracket? No, that's interesting. Anyone in 30 to 33 bracket? No. 0 to 29 bracket? Amazing. That's really good. So you just do slightly agree and the agree column. The first two columns. You don't do the last columns. Yeah. Okay. Pupils who are on the spectrum, a lot of the times you will see a lot is going on inside that you can't see on the surface, and you need to get to the surface. So they're a bit like an iceberg. So outside, they're calm and collected. Inside, it might be havoc going through their system. So when I work on emotions with our pupils, or when they get really angry, we talk about how it actually makes them feel. Do they clench their jaw? Do they tighten their fist? Do they feel hot when they're, when they're angry? Does their face go red? What happens to them? So that they can pinpoint where it is that they're actually feeling. We can tell when we're angry. We can tell when somebody's upset us, but they necessarily can't, okay? So if a student is in a state of meltdown, you need to understand that this is not personal. If you are a trigger for them, you need to remove yourself from that situation. You need to let somebody else take over and just say, I'm not dealing with this, you deal with this, take some time out, let the child take some time out, and then they will always come back to you. I had a student who used to trash my room every single afternoon. He was a tiny little thing. He was like 8 years old, and that was my first experience in primary, and I thought, never again am I working in primary after that. And he trashed my room every single day, and he used to say to me, Miss Ruby, I'm so sorry I did this again. But the next day, he would do it again. And it was, most of the time, it was usually if I wore the color red. He associated red with negativity. And he thought, if Miss is wearing red, she's in a bad mood. So I'm going to go and trash her room. This is how he saw things. And we had to teach him what was appropriate and what wasn't. You can't go around in the world. If people are going to wear red, you're not going to go around trashing their things because they're wearing red. So we had to teach him and train him how it needs to work. Wait until they're able to speak to you. Don't force them to speak to you. If they're not happy about something, I mean, if we're angry and somebody comes and says to us, what's wrong? What's wrong? Tell me what's wrong. And that person is the one who's instigating it. It's going to make you even more angry. You're going to get into a confrontation. You're probably going to say things you're going to regret. Same for these guys. Just leave them alone. Give them the space. If you've got a trusted member of staff, let them take the lead. Don't ever think that this is personal. How to deal with the students, be very clear, be very explicit, try not to joke with them because sometimes they don't really get idioms and jokes. Like if you say pull your socks up, they will literally pull their socks up rather than thinking I need to behave. Give them time to process what you're saying. Often as educators, we do this. I'm going to ask you a question. Answer this question for me. And before you've had a chance to process the question, you move on. Or you say, what's the answer for this question? Or I might say, you know, what's the capital of France? And then before I've given you 30 seconds to process this information, I will say, oh, you can answer this question, or I will give you the answer. Let them process the information. They know a lot more than we think they do. Give them space. Allow them choices. If you allow them choices, do not allow them more than 2. If you need to give them a choice for something that you want them to do. If you say to them, do you want black, blue, or grey? They're not going to be able to tell you black, blue, or grey. They will probably say, I don't know. I don't want to do this. So if you say, do you want black or blue? I think blue is going to look better. Black is going to do this. Then they will be able to tell you, yes, I want blue, or I want black. Speak slowly and clearly. Do not shout. If you raise your voice, they will raise their voice. The guy I spoke about, my year 11 boy, when he got so frustrating at times, and obviously as we're human beings, sometimes we have bad days, and I found myself one day that I didn't have the patience, and when he was raising his voice, I was raising my voice, and as I continued to raise my voice, he would shout even louder, and I got worried that this is going to get physical. So always just remain calm. Just keep your voice monotone if you can. Articulate your emotion. Make it explicit. If you're happy, make it explicit. Show them you're happy. If you're annoyed, show them you're annoyed. You're angry, and tell them your feeling. How can your school be SACS-friendly school? So how can you cater for pupils on the spectrum? They are going to come to you in 4 years' time, in 5 years' time. You are going to have those pupils in your schools. You need to have an informed staff. We get worried because it's such a specialized area. We get worried. We can deal with students with ADHD. We can deal with students who've got learning difficulties. When it comes to things like autistic spectrum, we just think, oh my God, what do we do here? Because they completely think like someone else. Roz Blackburn is a fantastic example. She's around 43, 44 years old. She gives talks. I've been to one of her talks. She can stand in front of people and she can talk. What she can't do is navigate her way around the city. She can't get to the talk herself. She needs a carer to do it. If the carer has to sit in the front seat, and when she's talking, the carer has to show her change cards. So if the carer shows a red card, it means she needs to change the topic. Otherwise, she will continue talking about it. A whole school understanding of the needs. I normally go through my faculties and I tell them about our SEN kids. That way you've targeted every single person. An integration of strategies. Enable your teachers to deal with these pupils. Give them strategy booklets. Give them things that you can actually do to help. Give them checklists. Speak to the students. Do their pupil profiles. Share that with staff. Staff needs to be aware. Your class teachers are the main point of contact, and they are the first point of call. If anything goes wrong, they cannot say to you, you need to deal with this student. I don't know how to. They are responsible. This is also in Dubai framework. It's also in the SEN code of practice, that ultimately, as a teacher standing in front of those students, you are the first point of call. Give full access to these people. I've had teachers email me and say, this child can't access MFL. You need to take them out. No, you need to differentiate for them. You are the teacher. So the way the teacher knows the subject, they're subject specialists, they can do it. I can only work on things that I can work on. I can't teach them French. I can't teach them Spanish. That has to come from the teacher. If everything fails, then yes, I will happily become involved. And SLT, you need a supportive SLT team. If the SLT is not on board, it's not going to happen. Okay, so if you've got any questions, I've got a handout for you. You can contact me here if you would ever like to come and our school is actually going through building works at the moment, but if you would like to come and meet me in person, please feel free to do so. My details are on your handout. Please don't forget to fill in your evaluation, and thank you very much. Do you have any questions at all that you need to ask? If you don't have any questions at the moment, feel free to email me. I'll be more than happy to email you back with any questions. Anything anyone wants to ask? Anything you're not sure of? Yes, so there's an evaluation, and then I think this is the link. Please take one. If you don't have one, ask me now, and then I'll give you one. There you go. Oh, I think there's some there as well. I think I did too many. Yeah, of course. Does anybody need any more? Yeah. Feel free to take as many as you want, because I've photocopied like 60. The survey. If you can just do your evaluation now, please take 1 minute to do this. It's really important. So if you can just stay and just do that for 1 minute, that would be most appreciated. It's the one for what works, yeah. If you don't have the link, just use this link.